"I'm filthy, don't take off my clothes," the giant mail-order bride said. The cowboy pulled back the blanket and froze in shock. Declan Warrenson had fallen in love with his mail-order bride through 37 letters, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. The cowboy had waited on that train platform in Shepherd's Bend, Montana, his heart pounding, ready to finally meet the woman who'd written, "I'm yours, if you'll have me," at the end of every letter. When Marlo Thatcher stepped off that train, nearly 6 feet tall with copper hair and green eyes, Declan thought she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. But something was wrong. His giant bride could barely stand, wrapped in layers of filthy clothes, and when she looked at him, those green eyes held nothing but terror. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have told you the truth." An hour into their ride home, Marlo collapsed. The cowboy pulled his horse to a stop under the cottonwood tree, his hands shaking as he lifted his mail-order bride down and laid her gently on the blanket in the dirt. "Don't take off my clothes," she begged, blood soaking through her skirts. "Please, Declan. In your letters you said you could love me, but you don't know what I'm hiding. You don't know how filthy I am." The cowboy knelt beside her in the dirt, his horse waiting behind him, and looked at the woman he'd been falling in love with through letters for 6 weeks. "Marlo, I need to help you," Declan said softly, his calloused hands moving to the blanket covering her trembling body. "No!" His bride grabbed his wrists desperately. "When you see what's under these clothes, when you see what I really am, you'll never love me the way you promised in your letters." But the cowboy's hands were already moving, already pulling back the blanket covering his giant, mail-order bride's shaking form. "Let me see," Declan whispered. "Let me see what you think makes you unlovable." His fingers peeled away the fabric as his bride sobbed beneath the tree. And when the cowboy finally saw what Marlo had been hiding under all those clothes, the cowboy pulled back the blanket and froze in shock. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant, 8 months at least, maybe more. Her belly was swollen beneath layers of fabric she'd wrapped so tight around herself that the cloth had cut deep red lines into her skin. Some of those cuts were bleeding. The bindings looked like torture devices, like she'd been trying to make herself disappear, to crush the evidence of what she carried until it simply stopped existing. Declan's hands went numb. His vision blurred at the edges. Behind him, his horse nickered softly, the only sound in the sudden terrible silence under that tree. "Now you know," Marlo whispered. Her voice was hollow, dead. "Now you know why I'm filthy." The cowboy couldn't speak, couldn't move. His mind was racing through every letter she'd written, searching for clues he'd missed, signs he should have seen. She'd never mentioned this, not once, not even a hint. "I should have told you," his bride continued, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face as she lay there in front of him. "I should have written it in my first letter. Dear Mr. Warrenson, I'm pregnant with another man's baby and I need to disappear before he kills me. But I didn't, because I knew you'd never send for me if you knew the truth." Declan's throat felt like it was closing. "Who," his voice cracked, "who did this to you? Does it matter?" Marlo's laugh was bitter and broken. "He's coming for me anyway. He's probably already on a train heading west. And when he gets here, when he finds out I ran..." She closed her eyes. "We're both dead, Declan, you and me. That's what you bought for your $50. A corpse, and the man who's coming to make sure I become one." The cowboy's hands were still frozen on the edge of the blanket, his body locked in that kneeling position as his entire world rearranged itself. This wasn't supposed to happen. Mail-order brides were supposed to be simple, safe, a transaction that led to companionship. Maybe even love eventually, but without the complications of courtship. Without the risk of this. "Say something," Marlo begged, her green eyes searching his face desperately. "Yell at me, hit me. Tell me you're putting me back on the train tomorrow. Just say something, please. This silence is killing me." But Declan couldn't say anything, because 3 years ago, his wife Sarah had died in childbirth along with their daughter. He'd held them both as they slipped away, had buried them on the hill behind his ranch, had sworn he'd never let himself care about anyone that deeply again, because the pain of losing them had nearly destroyed him. And now here was Marlo, pregnant and terrified and bleeding in his arms, asking him to choose, asking him to decide if she was worth the danger, worth the risk, worth the inevitable heartbreak that seemed to follow him like a shadow. The cowboy looked down at his mail-order bride, lying in the dirt beneath the cottonwood tree, her belly swollen with another man's child, her eyes begging him for mercy or rejection. Anything but this terrible silence, and Declan Warrenson made a choice that would change both their lives forever. "Get up!" Marlowe's eyes went wide with shock. Those were the first words the cowboy had spoken in what felt like an eternity, and they weren't what she'd expected. Not anger, not disgust, just two simple words delivered in a voice that left no room for argument. I can't," she stammered. "I'm bleeding. I think something's wrong with the baby. I said get up." Declan's hands were already moving, already sliding under her shoulders and lifting her into a sitting position with surprising gentleness, despite the command in his voice. "We're an hour from my ranch and you're losing blood. I need to stop the bleeding here or you won't make it home. Home." He'd said home, not back to the train station, not away from here. Home. Marlowe's breath caught in her throat as the cowboy pulled a knife from his boot. For one terrifying second, she thought he was going to kill her right there under that tree, put her out of her misery like a wounded animal. But instead, Declan began cutting away the layers of fabric she'd wrapped. Around her belly, the cruel bindings that had kept her secret hidden for 17 days on that train from Philadelphia. "This is going to hurt," he said quietly, his weathered hands working with practiced efficiency. "These cuts are deep. The fabric stuck to some of them. I don't care about pain," Marlowe whispered. "I deserve it." The cowboy's hands stopped moving. He looked up at her, and for the first time since pulling back that blanket, his eyes met hers fully. "Don't!" Declan said, his voice hard as iron. "Don't you dare tell me you deserve pain. Nobody deserves this." He went back to cutting away the bindings, and Marlowe bit down on her lip to keep from screaming as the fabric pulled away from wounds that had been festering for weeks. The Montana sun beat down on them. His horse shifted its weight nearby, and the cowboy worked in silence, his jaw clenched tight, his hands steady despite the horror he was uncovering. "I was an army medic," Declan said suddenly, his voice carefully neutral as he peeled away another layer. "Served during the Indian Wars, saw things that would make most men lose their minds. Patched up soldiers with their guts hanging out, amputated limbs in tents while men screamed, held boys younger than you while they died calling for their mothers." Marlowe didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Just watched his face as he worked, watched the way his jaw tightened every time he uncovered another wound. "I tell you that," the cowboy continued, pulling the last of the bindings free, "because I want you to understand something. I've seen the worst things men can do to each other. I've seen violence and cruelty and suffering that would break your heart. And you know what I learned from all that?" He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen and a clean cloth, began wetting the fabric to clean her wounds. His hands were so gentle it made Marlowe want to cry. "I learned," Declan said softly, his eyes focused on her injuries, "that the only thing that matters in this world is whether you choose to cause more suffering or whether you choose to stop it. That's it. That's the only choice that defines who you are. So what are you choosing?" Marlowe's voice came out as barely a whisper. "With me?" The cowboy's hands stilled on her belly, his palm resting gently against the curve where her baby moved beneath the skin. "I'm choosing to stop your suffering," Declan said, looking up at her with eyes that held no judgment, no anger, only a fierce determination that took her breath away. "I'm choosing to keep you safe, and I'm choosing to raise this baby with you if you'll have me." Marlowe stared at him in disbelief. "You don't mean that. You can't mean that. You don't even know what happened to me. You don't know—" "Then tell me," the cowboy interrupted. "Tell me everything while I clean these wounds. Tell me who's coming after you and why. Tell me what I need to know to protect you. Because make no mistake, Marlowe," his eyes blazed with something that looked dangerously close to love, "you're my wife now, and I don't let anyone hurt what's mine." So lying there in the dirt beneath the cottonwood tree, with the cowboy's gentle hands tending her wounds, Marlowe Thatcher began to tell him about Silas Murdoch, about her father's gambling debts, about the night Murdoch came to collect and decided her father's daughter would do just fine as payment, about the assault, about the threat that if she ever told anyone, he'd kill her and everyone she loved, about discovering she was pregnant and knowing that Murdoch would use the baby to trap her forever, a living chain she could never escape. And as she spoke, the cowboy cleaned her wounds, wrapped her belly in clean cloth from his saddlebag, and listened without interruption. His face grew harder with every word, his jaw clenched tighter. His hands moved more gently, as if he could somehow erase her trauma through the tenderness of his touch. When Marlowe finished, when she'd told him everything and was trembling with exhaustion and fear and the vulnerability of being truly seen for the first time in 8 months, Declan Warrenson lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing at all. "Can you ride?" he asked. "I think so." "Good." He carried her to his horse, settled her in the saddle with infinite care, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her body, protective, strong, solid, and Marlowe felt something she hadn't felt in 8 months. Safe. "What are we going to do?" she asked as the horse began moving toward his ranch. "When Murdoch comes, and he will come, Declan. He has money and men, and let him come," the cowboy said quietly against her ear. "Let him try to take you. Because I've got something he doesn't." "What's that?" Declan's arms tightened around her, one hand resting gently on her belly where her baby moved beneath his palm. "I've got a reason to fight that's stronger than his reason to hunt. He wants to own you. I want to love you. And love Marlowe." His voice dropped to a fierce whisper. "Love is always stronger than hate." Behind them, the cottonwood tree disappeared from view. Ahead of them, the Montana landscape stretched out endless and beautiful. And between them, something fragile and precious began to grow. Something that felt dangerously like hope. But 20 miles away, in the town of Shepherd's Bend, a man in an expensive suit was stepping off a train and asking the station master one simple question. "Did a tall woman with copper hair arrive here recently? Pregnant? Traveling alone?" And when the station master nodded yes, the man smiled, a cold, terrible smile that promised violence, and reached into his coat for the wanted poster he'd had printed in Philadelphia. A poster that claimed Marlowe Thatcher was a thief who'd stolen $5,000 and fled with her employer's unborn child. A poster that would turn every lawman in Montana Territory into Silas Murdoch's hunting dog. The ranch appeared on the horizon, just as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, painting everything gold and orange and crimson like the world was on fire. Marlowe had drifted in and out of consciousness during the ride, her body pressed against Declan's chest, his steady heartbeat against her back, the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. Now, as the horse slowed to a walk approaching the wooden fence line, she forced her eyes open and saw the place that was supposed to become her home. It was smaller than she'd imagined, a modest ranch house with a covered porch, a barn that had seen better days, corrals that needed mending. But it was clean, cared for, the kind of place a man built with his own 2 hands and tended with quiet pride. The kind of place that could be filled with laughter and love if given the chance. "It's not much," Declan said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "But it's mine. Free and clear. And now it's yours too." Before Marlowe could respond, the front door of the ranch house flew open, and a woman emerged, round and solid and somewhere in her 50s, with dark hair streaked with grey and eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Marlowe, slumped in the saddle, and her expression shifted from curiosity to alarm to fierce determination in the span of a heartbeat. "Dios mío," the woman breathed, already moving toward them. "Senor Deck, what happened? Is this your bride?" "Rosa, I need your help." The cowboy was already dismounting, already reaching up to lift Marlowe down with hands that trembled slightly despite their strength. "She's injured, pregnant, been hiding it for weeks and the bindings cut into her skin. I cleaned the wounds, but—" "Say no more." Rosa was already at his side, her weathered hands reaching for Marlowe with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd seen her share of suffering. "Bring her inside. Quickly now. We don't have time to waste." The next hour passed in a blur of pain and kindness. Rosa, who turned out to be Declan's housekeeper and the closest thing to family he had left, moved through the ranch house like a general commanding an army. She had Marlowe stripped of her filthy traveling clothes, sponged clean with warm water that smelled like lavender, and dressed in a soft cotton nightgown that must have belonged to someone else. Someone who wasn't here anymore. This was Sarah's, Rosa said quietly, as if sensing Marlowe's unspoken question. "Senor Deck's first wife. She died 3 years ago, in childbirth." The older woman's hands were gentle as they worked. "He's never let another woman wear her things before. Never even went back into this room after we buried her. So you understand what it means, yes? That he brought you here? That he's giving you her clothes?" Marlowe's throat closed. She couldn't speak, could only nod as tears slipped down her cheeks. "Good," Rosa said, satisfaction in her voice. "Then you understand that my Declan doesn't do anything halfway. When he chooses to love, he loves with his whole heart. And he's chosen you, Mija, even with all your complications." Her eyes dropped meaningfully to Marlowe's swollen belly. "Especially with your complications." "I don't understand why," Marlowe whispered. "I lied to him. I brought danger to his doorstep. I'm carrying another man's—" "Ah, but that's where you're wrong." Rosa's fingers worked carefully on the bandages, rewrapping the wounds with clean cloth. "You're not carrying another man's child. Not anymore. You're carrying Declan Warrenson's son or daughter now. Because that's how he'll see it from this day forward. That baby will have his name, his protection, his love. And anyone who says different will have to answer to him." The older woman's eyes grew fierce. "I've known that boy since he was 20 years old and came to Montana Territory with nothing but a horse and a dream. Watched him build this ranch with his bare hands. Watched him fall in love with Sarah and lose her and nearly lose himself in the grief. And I'm telling you right now," Rosa leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper, "he's a good man, the best man, but he's also dangerous when someone threatens what he loves. And he loves you already, whether you believe it or not." Before Marlowe could respond, Declan appeared in the doorway. He'd cleaned up, changed his shirt, but his eyes still held that same fierce protectiveness she'd seen under the cottonwood tree. "How is she?" "She'll live," Rosa said briskly, gathering up the soiled bandages. "But she needs rest. Real rest, not whatever she's been getting on that train. And food. When's the last time you ate, Mia?" Marlowe tried to remember and couldn't. "I don't know. Days, maybe." "Days." Rosa's voice dripped with disapproval. "Dios mío. No wonder you collapsed." She turned to Declan. "I'm making soup. You stay with her. Don't let her fall asleep until she's eaten something. And you—" She pointed at Marlowe with a wooden spoon that had appeared from somewhere. "You eat every bite I bring you or you answer to me. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Marlowe whispered, and despite everything, despite the terror and the pain and the uncertainty, she felt the ghost of a smile touch her lips. Rosa swept out of the room like a storm cloud, leaving Declan and Marlowe alone for the first time since arriving at the ranch. The cowboy stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at her lying in his dead wife's bed, wearing his dead wife's nightgown, and Marlowe couldn't read the expression on his face. "I'm sorry," she said finally, unable to bear the silence. "About your wife. About the baby. Rosa told me. I can sleep somewhere else if this is too—" "No." Declan moved into the room, pulled a chair close to the bed, and sat down like he planned to stay there all night. "This is exactly where you should be. Sarah would have wanted it this way. She always said this room should be filled with life and hope, not grief and memories." He reached out slowly, giving Marlowe time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand in his. His palm was calloused and rough and warm, and Marlowe realized with a start that she'd never actually touched him before. Not really, not like this, with intention and gentleness, and the weight of everything they'd been through pressing down on both of them. "I need you to understand something," the cowboy said quietly. "When I pulled back that blanket today and saw you were pregnant, my first thought wasn't anger. It wasn't betrayal. You want to know what it was? Marlowe nodded, not trusting her voice. Relief, Declan said, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of her hand. Because I thought for a second that you were dying, that I'd brought you all this way, just to lose you, the same way I lost Sarah. And when I realized you were pregnant, when I understood that's what you'd been hiding, his voice cracked. I was relieved, because pregnant means alive. Pregnant means there's a future. Pregnant means I get a second chance at the family I thought I'd never have again. But it's not your baby, Marlowe whispered. It's ours. The cowboy's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. From this moment forward, this baby is ours. Mine and yours. And when Murdoch comes, because you're right, he will come. He's going to learn that trying to take my family from me is the last mistake he'll ever make. Marlowe stared at him. This man she'd known for less than a day. This man who'd fallen in love with her through letters and chosen to keep loving her, even after seeing her darkest truth. Why? She breathed. Why would you do this? Why would you risk everything for someone like me? Declan leaned forward, his free hand reaching up to cup her face with heartbreaking gentleness. Because I've been dead inside for 3 years, Marlowe. Walking and breathing and going through the motions, but not really living. Not really feeling anything except this emptiness that went so deep, I thought it might swallow me whole. And then your first letter arrived. His voice grew thick with emotion. And for the first time since Sarah died, I felt something. Hope, curiosity, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I could learn to live again. He brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. So you're not just someone I'm saving. You're someone who's saving me right back. And I'll be damned if I let some monster from Philadelphia destroy that. Before Marlowe could respond. Before she could tell him that she was falling in love. With him too. That she'd been falling since that first letter. Where he'd written, "Tell me what makes you laugh." The sound of horses approaching shattered the moment. Multiple horses. Moving fast, Declan was on his feet instantly, his hand dropping to the gun at his hip. "Rosa!" he called out. "Get in here now!" The older woman appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Senor Deck, there are men outside. 5 of them, and they're carrying papers. Official-looking papers with a seal." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "It's too soon. Murdoch couldn't have gotten here this fast unless—" He turned to Marlowe, and she saw the realization dawn in his eyes. "Unless he sent someone ahead. Someone who was already in Montana territory waiting for word that you'd arrived." A knock sounded on the front door. Hard, authoritative. The kind of knock that demanded an answer. "Declan Warrenson," a voice called from outside. "This is Deputy Marshal Frank Garrett. I need to speak with you about a fugitive who may have arrived on today's train. A woman wanted for theft in Philadelphia. Open this door, or I'll be forced to break it down." Marlowe's blood turned to ice. "They found me," she whispered. "Oh God, Declan, they found me already." The cowboy looked at her, looked at the door, looked back at her. And then he did something Marlowe didn't expect. He smiled, not a happy smile, a dangerous one. The smile of a man who'd spent 3 years with nothing left to lose and had suddenly found something worth fighting for. "Good," Declan said quietly. "Let them come. Let's get this over with right now." Declan walked to the front door, with his hand resting on his gun, but he didn't draw it. Not yet. When he opened the door, 5 men stood on his porch, a deputy marshal with hard eyes and 4 hired guns who looked like they'd killed for the price of a meal. The deputy held up a piece of paper with an official seal. "Mr. Warrenson, I have a warrant here for the arrest of Marlowe Thatcher. She's wanted in Philadelphia for theft of $5,000 and kidnapping an unborn child belonging to Mr. Silas Murdoch. I'm told she arrived on today's train and may have come to this ranch." The deputy's eyes were cold. "Is she here?" "She's here," Declan said calmly. "She's also my wife. Married by proxy 3 weeks ago. Legal and binding under Montana Territory law." The deputy's expression didn't change. "That doesn't change the charges, Mr. Warrenson. I need to take her into custody." "No." The cowboy's voice was quiet but absolute. "You don't." "Sir, I don't want trouble. Then you shouldn't have brought guns to my property." Declan stepped onto the porch, and something in his posture made the 4 hired men shift nervously. "That warrant is based on false testimony from a man who raped my wife and is trying to use the law to drag her back to Philadelphia so he can finish what he started. She didn't steal anything. She ran for her life. And I'll be damned if I let you or anyone else take her." Behind the deputy, a horse moved in the shadows. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward into the light, and Marlowe's terrified voice came from inside the house. "That's him! That's Murdoch!" Silas Murdoch smiled, cold and cruel. "Hello, Marlowe. Did you really think you could run from me? That I wouldn't find you?" He turned to the deputy. "As you can see, Marshal, the woman is clearly here. I want her arrested immediately, and I want my child returned to Philadelphia where it belongs. Your child." Declan's voice dropped to something dangerous. "That baby belongs to my wife, and my wife belongs with me. Now get off my property before I make you leave." Murdoch's smile widened. "Or what? You'll shoot a deputy marshal? You'll start a war you can't possibly win." He gestured to the hired guns. "I have the law on my side, Cowboy." "What do you have?" "He has me." Everyone turned as Rosa stepped onto the porch holding a shotgun, like she knew exactly how to use it. Behind her, 3 more figures emerged from the barn, ranch hands Declan had sent for earlier, all armed, all loyal. "And me," said a new voice. Sheriff Tom Bridger rode up on horseback, his badge glinting in the lamplight. "I got a very interesting telegram from a federal marshal in Philadelphia about an hour ago. Seems there's no Judge Harrison who signed that warrant. Seems the signature's a forgery. And seems Mr. Murdoch here is under investigation for human trafficking and extortion." The sheriff's eyes were hard. "So that warrant's worthless, Deputy Garrett. And if you try to take Mrs. Warrenson anywhere, you'll be arrested for kidnapping." The deputy's face went pale. He looked at Murdoch, looked at the warrant, looked at Declan and his armed supporters. I didn't know." "Now you do," Sheriff Bridger said. "So, I suggest you and your men ride out of here before I decide to investigate who paid you to ignore proper legal procedure." The deputy and his hired guns were gone within minutes. But Murdoch remained, his face twisted with rage. "This isn't over," he hissed at Declan. "That child is mine by blood. I'll come back with real lawyers, real warrants, then I'll be waiting," the cowboy said quietly. "And every time you come, I'll be ready. Every time you try to take her, I'll stop you. Because she's mine now, Murdoch. And I protect what's mine." Silas Murdoch stared at him for a long moment, then turned and rode away into the darkness. Inside the house, Declan found Marlowe standing by the window, tears streaming down her face. "It's not over," she whispered. "He'll keep coming. He'll never stop." "Then neither will I," the cowboy said, pulling her into his arms. "I'll fight him every day for the rest of my life if that's what it takes." 6 months later, Marlowe Warrenson gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Sadie Rose. Declan held his daughter and looked at his wife, no longer terrified, no longer broken but strong and loved and finally free, and knew he'd made the right choice that day under the cottonwood tree. Some loves are worth fighting for. Some families are chosen, not born. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is pull back the blanket and choose to love what you find beneath. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments what moment moved you most. And if you believe in second chances and love that conquers fear, hit that subscribe button, because we have more stories that will restore your faith in the power of choosing love over fear. Watch our next story about a woman who discovers her husband's secret has been protecting her all along. You won't want to miss it.